Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White. Only to show you my meaning clearly, said the Jew, raising his eyebrows. To be able to do that, you depend on me. To keep my little business all snug, I depend upon you. The first is your number one. The second, my number one. The more you value your number one, the more careful you must be of mine. So we come at last to what I told you at first, that a regard for number one holds us all together, and must do so, unless we would all go to pieces in company. That's true, rejoined Mr. Bolter, thoughtfully. Oh, you're a cunning old codger. Mr. Fagin saw, with delight, that this tribute to his powers was no mere compliment, but that he had really impressed his circuit with a sense of his wily genius, which it was most important that he should entertain in the outset of their acquaintance. To strengthen an impression of so desirable and useful, he followed up the blow by acquainting him in some detail with the magnitude and extent of his operations, blending truth and fiction together as best served his purpose, and bringing both to bear with so much art that Mr. Bolter's respect visibly increased, and became tempered, at the same time, with a degree of unwholesome fear, which it was highly desirable to awaken. It's this mutual trust we have in each other that consoles me under heavy losses, said Fagin. My best hand was taken from me yesterday morning. You don't mean to say he died, cried Mr. Bolter. No, no, replied Fagin. Not so bad as that. Not quite so bad. What I suppose he was. Wanted, interposed Fagin. Yes, he was wanted. Very particular? Inquired Mr. Bolter. No, replied Fagin, not very. He was charged with attempting to pick a pocket, and they found a silver snuff box on him. His own, my dear, his own, for he took snuff himself, and was very fond of it. They remanded him till today, for they thought they knew the owner. Ah, he was worth 50 boxes, and I'd give you the price of as many to have him back. You should have known the Dodger, my dear, you should have known the Dodger. Well, but I shall know him, I hope. Don't you think so? Said Mr. Bolter. I'm doubtful about it, replied Fagin with a sigh. If they don't get any fresh evidence, it'll only be a summary conviction, and we shall have him back again after 6 weeks or so. But if they do, it's a case of lagging. They know what a clever lad he is. He'll be a lifer. They'll make the artful nothing less than a lifer. What do you mean by lagging and a lifer? Demanded Mr. Bolter. What's the good of talking in that way to me? Why don't you speak so I can understand you? Fagin was about to translate these mysterious expressions into the vulgar tongue, and being interpreted, Mr. Bolter would have been informed they represented the combination of words, transportation for life, and the dialogue was cut short by the entry of Master Bates, with his hands in his breeches pockets and his face twisted into a look of semi-comical woe. It's all up to Fagin, said Charlie, when he and his new companion had been made known to each other. What do you mean? They found the gentleman as owns the box, 2 or 3 more is a-coming to identify him, and the artful's booked for a passage out, replied Master Bates. I must have a full suit of mourning, Fagin, and a hat band to visit him in, afore he sets out upon his travels. To think of Jack Dawkins, Lummy Jack, the Dodger, the artful Dodger, going abroad for a common 2-penny, halfpenny sneeze box. I never thought he'd have done it under a gold watch, chain, and seals at the lowest. Oh, why didn't he rob some rich old gentleman of all his wallables, and go out as a gentleman, and not like a common prig, without no honor nor glory? With this expression of feeling for his unfortunate friend, Master Bates sat himself on the nearest chair with an aspect of chagrin and despondency. What do you talk about his having neither honor nor glory for? Exclaimed Fagin, darting an angry look at his pupil. Wasn't he always the top sawyer among you all? Is there one of you that could touch him or come near him on any scent? Eh? Not one, replied Master Bates, in a voice rendered husky by regret. Not one. Then what do you talk of? Replied Fagin angrily. What are you blubbering for? "'Cause it isn't on the record, is it?" said Charlie, chafed into perfect defiance of his venerable friend by the current of his regrets. "'Cause it can't come out in the dictment, 'cause nobody will never know half of what he was. How will he stand in the Newgate calendar? Perhaps not be there at all. Oh, my eye, what a blow it is!" "Ha ha ha!" cried Fagin, extending his right hand, turning to Mr. Bolter in a fit of chuckling, which shook him as though he had the palsy. "See what a pride they take in their profession, my dear. Ain't it beautiful?" Mr. Bolter nodded assent, and Fagin, after contemplating the grief of Charlie Bates for some seconds, with evident satisfaction, stepped up to that young gentleman and patted him on the shoulder. "Never mind, Charlie," said Fagin, soothingly. "It'll come out. It'll be sure to come out. They'll all know what a clever fellow he was. He'll show it to himself, and not disgrace his old pals and teachers. Think how young he is, too. What a distinction, Charlie, to be lagged at his time of life." "Well, it is an honor, that is," said Charlie, a little consoled. "He shall have all he wants," continued the Jew. "He shall be kept in the stone jug, Charlie, like a gentleman, with his beer every day, and money in his pocket to pitch and toss with, if he can't spend it." "No, shall he, though?" cried Charlie Bates. "Aye, that he shall," replied Fagin. "And we'll have a big wig, Charlie, one that's got the greatest gift of gab, to carry on his defence, and he shall make a speech for himself, too, if he likes, and we'll read it all in the papers. Artful dodger, shrieks of laughter. Here the court was convulsed, eh, Charlie, eh?" "Ha ha!" laughed Master Bates. "What a lark that would be, wouldn't it, Fagin? I say, how the artful would bother him, wouldn't he?" "Would," cried Fagin. He will." "Ah, to be sure, so he will," repeated Charlie, rubbing his hands. "I think I see him now," cried the Jew, bending his eyes upon the pupil. "So do I," cried Charlie Bates. "Ha ha ha ha! So do I. I see it all afore me, upon my soul, I do, Fagin. What a game! What a regular game! All the bigwigs trying to look solemn, and Jack Dawkins addressing of him as intimate and comfortable as if he was the judge's own son making a speech arter dinner. Ha ha ha!" In fact, Mr. Fagin had been so well-humoured that his young friend's eccentric disposition that Master Bates, who had first been disposed to consider the imprisoned Dodger rather in the light of a victim, now looked upon him as the chief actor in a scene of most uncommon and exquisite humour, and felt quite impatient for the arrival of the time when his old companion should have so favourable an opportunity of displaying his abilities. "We must know how he gets on to-day, by some handy means or other," said Fagin. "Let me think." "Shall I go?" asked Charlie. "Not for the world," replied Fagin. "Are you mad, my dear, stark mad, that you'd walk into the very place where—" "No, Charlie, no. One is enough to lose at a time." "You don't mean to go yourself, I suppose?" "I suppose," said Charlie with a humorous leer. "That wouldn't quite fit," replied Fagin, shaking his head. "Then why don't you send this new cove?" asked Master Bates, laying his hand on Noah's arm. "Nobody knows him." "Why, if he didn't mind," observed Fagin. "Mind," interposed Charlie. "What should he have to mind?" "Really nothing, my dear," said Fagin, turning to Mr. Bolter. "Really nothing." "Oh, I dare say about that, you know," observed Noah, backing towards the door and shaking his head with a kind of sober alarm. "No, none of that. It's not in my department, that ain't." "What department has he got, Fagin?" inquired Master Bates, surveying Noah's lank form with much disgust. "The cutting away when there's anything wrong, and the eating all the wittles when there's everything right. Is that his branch?" "Never mind," retorted Mr. Bolter, "and don't you take liberties with your superiors, little boy, or you'll find yourself in the wrong shop." And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.